I'm Linda Felice, and I studied mad cow disease over in England. I worked with Professor Eric Lamming, who was the advisor to the EU and the British governments on mad cow disease and how to deal with it and how to make public policy dealing with mad cow disease. My husband Larry, he has a PhD in animal science, and he was doing a postdoc in England while I was working with Professor Lamming, and he came across the British Sheep Dairy newsletter. And we knew that we wanted to work together. We wanted to do something in agriculture and something that would be financially viable with our children. And when he found the British Sheep Dairy newsletter, he said, "That's it. We're going to milk sheep." And I said, "We're going to milk what?" Because at that time, I didn't even realize you could milk sheep. And so in 1993, we moved to Vermont. So we worked with the USDA for 3 years, brought over sheep from Belgium and the Netherlands, and set up a family sheep farm. When we brought the sheep over, they had to go through 2 months quarantine over in Europe and a month quarantine here in the United States, so that if there was any transmissible, communicable diseases. So a whole series of tests were run on the sheep while they were over in Europe, and the same tests were repeated here. All the sheep passed with flying colors. First of all, there's no sheep in the world that's ever had mad cow disease. Second of all, we know what these animals ate, because the theory was that BSE, or mad cow disease, was transmitted through contaminated feed from ground up cattle being made into meat and bone meal, and then being put into cattle feed and into sheep feed. And we knew that none of the shepherds had ever used any feed that had any meat and bone meal. Plus, these animals were lambs when they came in, so most of the feed that they had eaten was their mother's milk. And USDA, they kept telling us that they wanted us to surrender the animals. And we were approaching it from a scientific way. And so USDA showed up at our farm and put the animals under a quarantine. And when Wayne Zelenga showed up, state vet for Vermont, showed up at our farm, he handed us the quarantine papers and he said, "I don't mean this as a threat, but let me tell you, if you tell anybody about this, you go to the media, you get greedy, you ask for a bunch of money, we're going to put you out of business, and don't think we haven't done it before." When we were threatened, we went quiet for an entire year. We didn't tell anybody. We told my parents and Larry's parents, and that was it. So here we're part of this great organic group of farmers working together, and we're seeing them day to day, and we can't even tell them these sheep are being quarantined under fear of mad cow disease. And it was a really, really tough year. We brought over 3 European scientists, and we had a meeting down in Washington at USDA. So the 3 Europeans all presented their information, and they said, "Okay, this is what's going on in Europe. There's not a single sheep being killed under suspicion of mad cow disease. The flocks that the animals were imported from, they've all been continued to be surveilled. They're all perfectly healthy. Everything showing that our sheep were not at risk." And so then we opened up for questions, and it was silent. No one said anything. And finally, Linda Detweiler's boss, Alfonso Torres, said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but we're under political pressure, and you're going to have to surrender your animals." The people that have the money are the packers, the slaughterhouses, and the feedlots. And that's who control the beef industry, and that's also who controls USDA. Because there's a whole revolving door of people that go from the pharmaceutical and the beef industries. They have positions there. They go into USDA. They get legislation passed or whatever their pet project is, and they just go back and forth working between the two.
From a science perspective, from a medical perspective, mad cow disease doesn't infect sheep. Sometimes what happens with these situations is when federal authorities embark on a track, it's mighty difficult to turn it around, because we're not going to back off. We don't want to lose face. And much as we all like to think of food safety is based on science, and exclusively science, there's inevitably political overtones, there's social overtones, there's societal pressures on the way food safety is run, operated, and in the way that inevitably regulators are going to interact with with the companies that they regulate. Can't be helped.
Our son was 15 years old at the time. He was a huge James Bond fan, and he comes to us and he says, "Mom, Dad, we're being watched." And we're like, "Francis, you know, this is stressful, but don't be paranoid." He's like, "No, I know we're being watched." I'm like, "How can you tell that you're being watched?" "Well, I see these cars going by, and they slow down and they watch me, and sometimes they're parked." And we're like, "Well, this is a tourist area. It could be anybody." He's like, "No, Mom, the cars are clean." Because in Vermont, nobody has a clean car.
And they wore ties.
And they wore ties.
Yeah. But, you know, then we started increasingly, customers would come in the store and say that they saw these guys parked up at the Vista, and they were just being seen more and more. And, you know, here we were doing sheep farming and running a little country store. And, you know, what were they watching for? What did they think we were going to do?
So when USDA was monitoring us, they spent over $1 million watching us. And we would see these guys climbing in and out of the fences. And as part of the court case a few years ago, we received some of the diaries. And the day was broken down into 15-minute segments. And it said what each of the family members were doing, where were we, you know, who was at the store. Larry Felice and son Francis moved the sheep, missed one.
Anyone in the valley that they saw that had a Save Our Sheep bumper sticker, they wrote down their license plates.
And then they investigated them. They also did 2 criminal investigations of Larry. Linda Detweiler requested this. So the first one was to see if anything about the importation had been illegal, and then and they couldn't find anything. So the second one was a personal criminal investigation to see if he had anything in his background. I married a clean one. We took USDA to court to stop them from seizing our sheep, and 17 days before our appeals court hearing, they showed up at 5:30 in the morning in the middle of a blizzard, and they had 42 armed federal agents and USDA officials, and they cleared out our entire barn. They took the sheep that we brought from Belgium and the Netherlands. They even took the sheep that I had brought over from New Zealand, and they took them out to Iowa, and they killed them for a disease that doesn't exist to this day.
Hurry! They can't wait another 2 weeks! Get them moving, people!
They did basically a lethal injection. They collected tissue samples, put them into this lye solution to make them disintegrate, because they were acting like this was such a danger, even though there was absolutely nothing wrong with the sheep. Linda Detweiler received all the test results, and it showed that every single animal was negative. And nobody knew about this except Linda Detweiler. We were unaware of these results. The media kept asking for test results. On August 3rd, 2001, the very same day that she got the test results, there was a press conference by USDA that said they had no test results, and that it was going to be months, that they had to build a new facility, and that they wouldn't know for months until the results had come in. So they lied to everyone.
Later that summer, USDA said that they wanted to take all of our equipment, take a lot of the pieces off of the barn, and basically take anything that we had that would allow us to continue in business. And so they brought
Heather's milking parlor.
Heather's milking parlor, you know, you name it. And so they brought a giant dumpster here, and we filled that up with a lot of the stuff, the trailer they just took off. And what they told us is they were taking everything down to Massachusetts to be incinerated. And they were also taking the hay that we were producing off the land and saying that that was dangerous as well, and they needed to take that away and have that incinerated. Well,
And that went on for a couple months.
Yeah, and I became really suspicious about that. So one day they came to get a load of the hay, and I decided to follow the truck. And they went to the local landfill that's only a few miles away, and they dumped it right into the landfill with everything else. So I guess they really didn't feel it was dangerous. And we found out later that the USDA had all the test results that proved that there was nothing wrong with the sheep before they ever started bringing those dumpsters around. So they had all the evidence to show there was no danger whatsoever, as we all knew from the beginning, but they had the evidence, and yet they spent all this money and created this facade of doing these things for public safety, and all they were doing is dumping things in the local landfill and wasting more resources.
When we were trying to get compensation, they waited till 18 months after the animals had been taken, and it cost us $5,000 a head to bring the animals in. They gave us a check that was $1,300 per animal. And we said, why the discrepancy? Why didn't you pay us at least what you paid these other people? And they said, well, you chose to fight. USDA likes to instill fear. And so by giving people a gag order or telling them they can't talk about it, that makes it so that they feel that they can control it better.
I knew we would win eventually. I didn't know if we could save the sheep, and we didn't do that. But to be able to show that the whole thing was a complete fraud and premeditated and done on behalf of USDA's agribusiness sponsors and not for human health as they pretended it to be.